The press tells you that the US and Israel must contain Iran because of nuclear weapons. Politicians tell you Tehran is a threat to world peace. But let's pause for a second. If nuclear weapons are truly the only red line, why has North Korea successfully tested them countless times without the US launching an all-out war? The truth is always hidden where people look the least. Follow the money. A war with Iran, whether it's the ongoing proxy war or a future direct conflict scenario, is highly unpredictable. But if we string together the historical and economic facts, we can absolutely see its ultimate endgame. It won't end in total destruction, but with a treaty at the negotiating table. And the most crucial clause won't be about the number of dismantled nuclear centrifuges, but a commitment. The US dollar must remain supreme. Welcome to New to Us. Today, let's uncover the secrets no one tells you about the US-Iran conflict and why a system called the petrodollar is far more terrifying than any atomic bomb. 1. The tip of the iceberg, the nuclear game. To understand what's beneath the surface, we first need to glance at the top. Since the US unilaterally withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal, JCPOA, in 2018, Iran has accelerated its uranium enrichment program. The telling numbers. Reports from the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, show that Iran has enriched uranium to 60%, dangerously close to the 90% weapons-grade threshold. Their uranium stockpile has now exceeded the limits of the old agreement by dozens of times. The US and its Western allies use this as the perfect pretext to tighten sanctions and threaten military force. A nuclear-armed Iran would directly threaten Israel's survival and diminish US influence in the Middle East. That's the narrative on the evening news. But folks, that's just the cover story. History proves that the US rarely mobilizes on a massive scale solely out of international security concerns. They act when their core interests and financial power are directly threatened. And that threat has a name: de-dollarization. Beneath the surface, the petrodollar's life or death mandate. In 1971, US President Richard Nixon made a shocking decision, taking the US dollar off the gold standard. From that moment on, the greenback was essentially just pieces of paper backed by faith. So why has the whole world still desperately needed the USD for over 50 years? The answer lies in 1974, when the US struck a historic deal with Saudi Arabia. The US would provide weapons and security for Middle Eastern royalty. In exchange, all OPEC nations had to sell their oil, the lifeblood of the global economy, exclusively in US dollars. The petrodollar system was officially born. Any country wanting to buy oil, be it Japan, India, or South Korea, had to convert their local currency into USD. This created an infinite demand for the American currency. The consequence, thanks to the petrodollar, the US can print money freely without fearing hyperinflation, because that inflation has been exported to the rest of the world. The US national debt has now surpassed $34 trillion, over 120% of GDP. Who would buy this mountain of debt if not the countries that need USD to hold in reserve and buy energy? Now look at Iran. This country holds the world's third largest oil reserves and second largest natural gas reserves. Even with the harshest sanctions, Iran is still selling oil. But the problem is, they're not selling it in USD. The shocking truth. According to data from Kepler, Iran's oil exports in 2023 and early 2024 hit a 5-year record high, reaching 1.5 million barrels per day, and 90% of this oil went to China. How are they trading? Transactions are settled in Chinese yuan or RMB, or through barter mechanisms completely bypassing the Western-controlled SWIFT international payment system. Do you see the gravity of this yet? A nuclear bomb can destroy a city, but breaking the petrodollar system would destroy the entire economic foundation of the world's #1 superpower. If other nations look at Iran and realize, wow, we can buy and sell oil without the US dollar, that will be the end of the American financial empire. The United States will never, repeat, never allow this to happen. Not in the past, like with Iraq or Libya, not now, and not in the future. 3. The invisible hands, the BRICS war. Who wants to break the petrodollar? Obviously, Iran isn't alone. Looming behind Tehran are giant shadows: Russia, China, and the BRICS bloc. None of these countries have officially declared war on the US. Russian or Chinese troops aren't going to clash directly with American soldiers in the Middle Eastern desert. Why bother if they can use Iran as a strategic pawn on the geopolitical chessboard? Let's look at the numbers to see the power of this bloc. The expanded BRICS bloc, now including Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE, currently controls over 40% of global oil production. BRICS's GDP, based on purchasing power parity, has already surpassed that of the G7. Both Russia and China are viewed by the US as strategic rivals. They share a common desire to dethrone the US from its monopoly position. And the most perfect strategy right now isn't to defeat the US outright, but to make America weaken itself. They will support Iran quietly, pumping in weapons, providing air defense tech, sharing satellite intelligence, and most importantly, creating economic corridors so Iran isn't choked to death by embargoes. What is the ultimate goal of this axis? They want the US bogged down. They want Washington to pour trillions of dollars into an endless war in the Middle East, just as America was bled dry in Afghanistan and Iraq. While the US is busy dealing with armed groups and depleting its resources, that's when its position as the world's #1 superpower cracks from the inside. But America isn't naive. The minds at the Pentagon clearly understand this trap of a war of attrition. The US won't let itself get dragged into a pointless, drawn-out guerrilla war. If forced to intervene directly, the US strategy will be shock and awe, total military dominance. Let's look at the terrifying disparity. The US defense budget for 2024 is around $842 billion, larger than the combined defense budgets of the next 10 countries. Meanwhile, Iran's official military budget hovers at under $10 billion. Even with covert backing from Russia or China, the Iranian military cannot stand toe-to-toe with the US war machine in conventional battles. No country is going to send its regular army to protect Iran from American military might. They will all just stand by, issue condemnations, call for diplomacy, and cheerlead on international forums. However, Iran doesn't need to defeat the US on the battlefield. They have another far more lethal weapon, the Strait of Hormuz. This is the world's jugular vein, where 20% of the global oil supply, about 21 million barrels a day, passes. If pushed into a corner, Iran only needs to lay mines and blockade this strait. Global oil prices would instantly skyrocket past $150, maybe even $200 a barrel. The European and Asian economies would collapse. And that is exactly when NATO would be forced to intervene. Protecting international shipping lanes and energy supplies is of vital interest for the West. The US wouldn't act alone. They would drag the largest military alliance on the planet into the fray to create an overwhelming, irresistible pressure. 5. The military-industrial complex, the paradox of war and peace. A realistic, even brutal perspective we have to acknowledge. The world constantly chants slogans of peace, but the economic foundations of many major powers are built on war. Look at America's military-industrial complex. Giant corporations like Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Boeing, and General Dynamics simply cannot survive if the world is too peaceful for too long. Prolonged peace means slashed defense budgets, tens of billions of dollars in canceled weapons contracts, idle factories, and the atrophy of the nation's deterrent power. Conversely, war is a massive driver for these companies. Every time a $2 million to $4 million SM-3 interceptor missile is fired to shoot down a $20,000 drone from pro-Iranian forces, American taxpayer money flows directly into the pockets of defense contractors. Everything is a balancing act. Wall Street financial firms hate instability because it spikes inflation and disrupts supply chains. But weapons manufacturers need instability to survive. The US has to do what it takes to protect its core interests, because if it doesn't, America itself will fall into dire straits when the petrodollar system totters and collapses, dragging down the USD and the entire #1 economy with it. Conflict is sometimes not a failure of diplomacy, but the inevitable outcome when diplomacy can no longer protect a nation's wallet. 6. The Treaty of the Strong. So, how will this Iran war, whether an economic Cold War or a hot conflict, actually end? War never lasts forever. It won't end with planting a flag in the capital city of Tehran. The cost of a full-scale occupation is unimaginable. Instead, the US will use overwhelming military force combined with crushing sanctions to drag Iran and its backers back to the negotiating table in a position where they must make concessions. Ultimately, there will be a comprehensive negotiation. You'll see news broadcasts praising a victory for diplomacy and the successful containment of the nuclear program.
There will be thick documents regulating the number of centrifuges, the rate of uranium enrichment, and the lifting of sanctions. But the most important clause, the decisive one, will never be written publicly in the press. It will be the unspoken agreements, the forced handshakes under the table. Iran must bring its oil back into the orbit of the US dollar, or at the very least, stop spearheading a global movement to boycott the petrodollar. The war only ends if and when the petrodollar system reaffirms its monopoly position in this world. Money is the bloodline, and for America, the dollar is its heartbeat.